everyone, it's James, Fit RV, and today's project is a little more involved than some of the other ones, which is saying a lot. Today we are going to be replacing this monitor panel. Now, there are several reasons why I want to replace it, and what you're seeing right here, a warning about freezing temperatures of 44 degrees, is one of the reasons that I want to replace it. So, press OK. We're going to be replacing it. It's going to involve running wires throughout number one here. Now, I've already done quite a bit of disassembly of number one, easy stuff like just removing access panels and that. So you'll be able to see that. And I've got a helper for fishing wire so that we can have both a helper and a camera person. Learn that one. And yeah, so now when we're replacing this monitor panel, we need to replace all the functions on the panel. Now, it turns on the water pump, and this is another one of the reasons why we don't particularly like this panel. It turns on the water pump, but to do that, it's like touch it, 1, 2, touch water pump, 1, 2, touch on. And it's that long to turn on the water pump each time. I don't like that. I want a switch that turns it on and off. So that's one function, okay, go back, that we're going to have to replace. The next is the tank level monitors. To do that, really no surprise here, we're going to install a set of SeeLevel tank monitors. I have installed SeeLevel monitors on literally every RV I've ever had. Love them. They work great. They're very reliable. They work fast. So we'll be replacing the tank level monitors with that. Now, battery monitoring, there's coach and chassis battery monitoring, and I've got plenty of places to monitor our coach battery, so I don't really care about that. I can use a phone app or whatever. But I do want to keep tabs on the chassis battery. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to power the SeeLevel with the chassis battery instead of the coach battery. And I've already checked, it only uses 200 milliamps and only when the panel is on. But I'm going to power it that way, so I'll still be able to see the battery voltage for the engine starting battery. Now, we don't have a generator. If you did have a generator, you would have to find an alternate way to start your generator if you were going to remove this panel. So I've actually kind of cheated, and I've got part of it already done, so we'll show you that next. All right, so the part where I cheated, the part that I've already got done, is the pump function. Now, it was pretty easy to do, and I installed a pump switch right here because we didn't have an awning or awning lights on this RV, and so there were two blanks here for switches. Now, to do this, you'll need a momentary switch, one that can handle up to 15 amps, and one that also has a light with separate connections for each one. So, got the switch, plugged it in, but the wiring for it is something that may take a little explanation, so let's go to the back and I'll show you what I did for that. Okay, now the way Winnebago wires pump switches, you're not directly switching the pump, which is right down there, actually. You're not directly switching the pump. What you're doing is you're sending a signal to a relay, and the relay turns on the pump. It's an easy way for them to have pump switches in multiple locations, and that's great. But I didn't want to have to figure that out and go find the relay and whatever. So, easier thing to do, I thought. There are two other pump switches in this coach, one in the bathroom, and then one here on the outside water service center. This one seemed easier to get to, and it's a shorter run to where I want the switch. So what I did, and just due to the sheer number of plumbing connections on this water center service panel, you can't really remove it and work on it from the outside. So you have to come out and work on it from the inside. So I did that. I found the pump switch, the momentary switch, and the light. And basically I just cut those wires and then put the two remaining wires along with my third wire into some of these Wago connectors, and that's just a really easy way to do it without having to make butt splices with two wires in one end and one in the other. I like the Wago connectors. So then I took my wire as part of a 14 gauge 4-conductor cable, and I ran that, just like we're going to be doing today for the SeeLevel, ran it all the way down under here behind the refrigerator, up through the galley, up to where the pump switch goes. And I didn't figure you needed to see that twice, so I just went ahead and did that. But once I got those wired in, and in parallel with the pump switch and light that were already there, everything worked. Super easy to do, apart from the running wire. Anyway, on to the project. So for those of you who aren't familiar with the SeeLevel system, let me show you what it's going to take to install it. First, I'm going to need some wire, and I've got here an 18 gauge 4-conductor wire. The wires coming out of the gauges themselves are only 18, and we're talking millivolts that we're using. So wire, They do call for a 7.5 amp fuse, so I've got a fuse holder because that's not provided here. Now, the SeeLevel itself consists of a monitor panel, and this is in the bag. I'm going to leave it there until we're ready for it. So this one has monitors for battery. Actually, let me take that out. Let me clip that. All right. So you can see it. This one can monitor battery, which we're going to be hooking up to the chassis battery, fresh tank, a gray and galley tank. Now that takes some explanation. The EKKO actually has 2 gray water tanks and they're plumbed together. I have a feeling sometimes they might not be equalizing like I think they are. So I'm actually going to put monitors on both of the gray tanks. And then black tank, which we're not going to use until I figure out how I can fit one of these sensors on a cassette and remove it. That would be really cool, and I'll keep thinking about that. So anyway, that's the monitor panel itself. There's a multi-pin connector on the back of it. And then there are, get back in there. There are a number of these. These are the sender units. So you basically stick them to the side of the tank, and then they will send like little sonar pulses, whatever, through the tank to be able to read the value. And then they've got 2 tiny 18 gauge wires coming out of them. There are a number of those, including one for the black tank that I won't use. And they're all wired in parallel. So basically at the tank end, I'm just going to wire all the blacks together, all the blues together, and then run one wire up to the panel. There's a little wiring harness for the panel, only 3 wires for the whole thing. We've got the blue signal from the sensors, black ground, and then red, this is going to be where I'm going to get my chassis battery voltage. So that's pretty much, there's nothing else in the box because there's nothing else you need. So that's what it takes to install it. Now the first thing we're going to do is we're going to pull this wire and we're going to get the monitor panel itself working, because there's a trick you can do, not a trick really, they tell you to do it. You can tape the sensors in place before you glue them down for good to make sure you're getting the readings you expect. But in order to do that, you've got to have the monitor panel working. So that's coming first. Let's get pulling wire. All right, so for fishing wire, we're going to have the spool end over here, and we're just going to start fishing it through. And as you can see, I've removed kind of all of the access panels that one could hope to remove to get the wire up there. So we're going to go at least as far as under the fridge, and then we'll call in the assistant and run behind the microwave, etc. So here we go. Look at that. All right, you ready to give it a gentle pull? Let me have this. Make sure we don't get hung up. All right, pull slowly. All right, we've got the wire pulled as far as the bottom corner of the fridge. The way it has to go now is up diagonally through the fridge and across the ceiling. So to get it there, we're going to have to remove the microwave. So here we go with that. All right, get me untangled. Okay. Woohoo! You got it? Yep. Huh. Okay, so the fish tape didn't work. It's very, very tight up here to get the fish tape by. So what we're going to do, and I thought about using one of these other wires to pull, like one of these cable TV things, since we don't use these, and using that to pull through, but I've decided against that. What we're going to do is we're going to take this cable, which is the control cable for our inverter, and I know it's not taped to anything or run through a cable clamp behind here because I ran it. So we're going to use that. We're going to pull through a piece of string. Then we're going to use said piece of string to fish back up both the wire and this cable again, because I do need that. So here we go. You want to feed and I'll pull?
I'll tell you when I have to clear the clip, okay?
Okay. Still good?
Clip is through now.
I almost wonder if I shouldn't leave the string in there. Not a bad idea, right? Is it going?
Not really. it's springing back.
How much? I just don't have a good feeling.
Well,
It won't make it, will it?
Is it going to here,
Yeah.
right?
It won't make it.
No, it will.
Okay, so we couldn't fish through wire, and we couldn't even pull it through. It was getting hung up on stuff, so we wound up removing the refrigerator, which was super fun. But anyway, it makes it really easy to run the wire now. So like I've got the wire run, we've got some wire loom around it, and we're even fixing up a couple things. Like there are some screws that were protruding through here. We're going to trim those back, and yeah, so things are progressing. And then remember, this is the easy part. 3, nope, 4, 5, whatever it takes. All right, we're now to the point where we can remove this control panel. And it's just this little phone type cable in the back, and it's out. All right, so I'm gonna have to build myself, or 3D print myself, another trim ring, sort of like this, to mount the SeeLevel panel in, because it's not quite as large as what was there before, but that's an exercise on the computer, so I'll do that at a later date. All right, so I'm wiring in, so the SeeLevel comes with this little wiring harness, right? I'm wiring in a fuse on this end because this end is going to be much easier to get to than the other end once everything is back together. So I'm just wiring in a fuse here. So I'm using these instead. There. So now, I should put a piece of tape on that. Okay, so wiring this up, we're going to go red to red, black to black, and blue I'm going to match up with white, and the green wire will just be unused. And we're good to go. But we don't have power yet, so, but this side of the wiring is done. All right, so I mentioned that I want the chassis battery is what I want to measure the voltage of with the SeeLevel panel. So I'm going to go back there and look for the wire that is connected to the chassis battery, because there's got to be one, because the former panel was monitoring the chassis voltage. I just want to know what voltage I'm looking for. So we are looking for approximately 12.42 volts.
Hey, say that again, what?
That is kind of a funny film angle. So under here, where you can't see because you're outside the RV, is the brains for the former monitor panel, right? So, and there's the cable that I just unplugged on the other end. So there's some connectors on here. One of them says generator, one of them says power, and one of them says sense. I'm going to guess sense are going to be the wires that go to the tank sensors on the current setup. And somewhere in these power connectors, which I can pull out, I've got to find 12.42 volts. And then I'll know which connector to cut, and that becomes my power. All right. Okay, so I found the two connectors here on this power connector that match the voltage I'm seeing on the starting battery. And these two, just by way of whatever, are the two that match up with the current that, or the voltage that I would expect from the house batteries. So these are the two wires, that's both the hot and the ground, that I am going to use to install the SeeLevel. So there we go. Okay, so we've removed this panel, which was not fun, nor was it easy. There were some screws, that was fairly straightforward, but then there were 5, I believe, rivets actually holding things behind the panel. You have to drill out the rivets, so I'm picking up the debris from the rivet drilling. And the reason we're doing this is I'm trying to find some place appropriate to attach the gray tank sensors. I'd like them in the deepest part of the tank. Unfortunately, this old sensor is here. This one I can get a sensor on. Okay, well, it's the next day. We spilled over into day 2. I've got the 3D printer going right now. It is printing up the little faceplate adapter trim ring that'll go around the SeeLevel panel when we're all done. But the real action is happening outside where we're about to do a test. So let's go outside and I'll show you. So first off, notice that I've got the RV up on blocks and we are leveled side to side because we're going to test how well we measure the water level. So being level side to side, probably a good thing. But the real stuff to show you is inside. Okay, I have the sensors mounted, but they're not mounted permanently. They're just taped into place with like painter's tape. I've got the one on the fresh tank here and then the ones on the gray tank, which I can show you from the outside. And the reason why they're in here temporarily is because this way it gives you the chance to make sure that they're reading properly before you glue them down. Because once you glue them down, it's kind of like a one-shot deal, right? But let's go up to the control panel. So this is wired in sort of temporarily. You can see we're reading the battery voltage. That's all fine. So when I installed them, I noticed the fresh tank shows 0%. Okay, aces. But then there's the thing you can do where you can hold down this and hit the battery. Oh, nope. You can hold down that and hit the battery button. It'll get you into a diagnostic mode. And I got poo, which actually it's P00, height 8. That's right. P00, which meant either complete success, 100%. Or abject failure, 0%. And I didn't know, so I thought that was a good place to stop for the night. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna start filling the fresh tank with water. And since I can see right through the fresh tank, I should know about how much water is in the tank, and then I can check with what it's reading, and we'll see if they match up. And then we'll do the same for the gray. Now the sticker on the fresh tank, back here again, it would have been really easy for me to remove this panel right here and put the sensor right on this side of the tank. But I didn't want to do that because the gravity fill and the vent tubes, they're all on this side of the tank. And if I happen to be filling up while the tank is leaning, say to this side, if the sensor was over on this side, it would be high and dry and it would say I was only like 80% full as I start pouring water out the top all into our campsite. So I wanted the sensor close to where the vents and the fill tubes are. So it's over here, even though it's quite a bit more difficult for me to get my hand in there to get it on, but I did. So that's the setup for now, and then I'll show you the gray tanks later, but we're gonna go and start filling this bad boy up and see what we get. Now I'm gonna fill the tank with the gravity fill because I've already kind of winterized it, and so I'd like to keep as much water out of the lines as possible, but this gravity fill goes right into the fresh tank, and then I can just drain the tank if I can remember which one of these is the fresh tank drain. So here we go. All right, so according to the SeeLevel, we have a fresh tank level of 19%. So it is moving, that's good. And let's come back here and look. That looks to me like about 20% full, roughly a fifth, or well, I guess 19%. But you can see, you can't see so much that way. If I do that, you can see the water level here in the vent is right there. And then that's, you know, roughly it goes down to there and up to here. So that's about a fifth of the way. We're going to keep going and just kind of fill it all the way and just take a couple checkpoints along the way. Okay, we've been filling it more into my eyes. That looks about halfway-ish. Halfway-ish. So let's see what the panel says. Booyah! Right on. All right, cool. 56%. Let's just try to fill it all the way up now and make sure we get what I'd like is 100% before the water starts spilling out all over the inside of my water center cabinet. So that's what we're shooting for. So hopefully that's what we get. All right, so filled it up. Fresh tank is showing 100%. Let's come back and have a look at the tank. So we can see visually that the water is all the way at the top of the tank. It's not overflowing out the side. And there's maybe that much room at the top of the tank, which is about what I want. It's not up to this top part, but it's encroaching up on that. So think it's probably in the gravity fill tube a little bit at 100%, but that's kind of pretty darn good. And depending on when I mount the sensor for real, if I mount it a little higher or lower, it might read higher or lower depending, but we're going to call that a success. Oh, well, let's check the power level. Before we had poo. Wait, press and then press that one. 89. Okay, so as the tank fills, it's 89%. So it was definitely 100 or success rather than 0, and it's working its way up from there. Cool. All right, fresh tank. Woo, fresh tank complete. Now let's start to worry about the gray tank. So the SeeLevel panel came with 2 gray tank monitors, and one's labeled gray and one's labeled galley. And I wanted that model specifically because we actually have 2, count them 2 gray tanks. Now, they're plumbed together and they should equalize, but just due to the way that our last tank monitor was reading, I kind of wondered sometimes if they really were equalizing. Well, the way it works is the galley kitchen drains into this tank, and then the shower and sink in the bathroom drain into this tank, and then they should equalize here. So this one I'm going to call the galley sensor because that's where the kitchen sink drains. And you can see here I've got, and this was really difficult to do, by the way. I had to remove all this metal and then we had to drill out some rivets, and it's still bloody knuckles to try to get your hand back here to actually install the thing. But I've got the galley tank sensor taped on here. So we're going to try to do the same thing we did for the fresh tank, except I'm just going to bring the hose inside and stick it down the galley drain so I don't have to run the faucet. And then we're going to watch, and we'll see if one fills up or if both. Now the gray tank sensor, by the way, since this is also going to come into play, is around here on the back side of this. I really wanted to put it here, but this is the old former tank sensor, so I couldn't put it there. So I had to loosen the garage wall so that I could push it away a little bit to get my hand in there to mount this on the back side of the gray tank. So we're going to go and start filling the kitchen sink with water, and let's see how she does. That's one cool feature of the SeeLevel. If you press the button twice, you get a little dot down here in the corner, and it will stay on that tank. So if you're like filling your tank solo, you don't have to come in here and push it each time. You can look through a window and see it. There we go. We're at 4% on the galley tank. How about the gray tank? Nothing. See, I'm not totally equalizing like right away. Galley 4. Gray 4. Galley 4. Fresh 100. Gray 4. Galley 4. All right, so they are equalizing fairly well. Now, these tanks are opaque. I have no way to see through them to know when they're actually full. So we'll just have to take its word for it that it's being reasonable, but 4% in this amount of time seems reasonable. Okay, so based on the amount of time I've been filling, it was kind of roughly the same amount as the fresh tank and the galley tank. Now it says, is it 92%? And since I can't see it, I don't want to fill it any more than that and have the risk of something backing up on me. So the gray tank, it says, is it 88%? So that's 92, 88. But I have an explanation for that. And that is, the gray tank is the one that's in the back. The galley tank is the one further forward. And if you look here, I said we were level side to side, but we're not level front to back. We're about 4 inches down in the front, which means that the back is up. And so that back corner of the tank where the sensor strip is might be sitting a little high and dry. So I'm okay with that 4% discrepancy based on how we're parked right now. But let's do that power level check. So we do galley and bat, diagnostic, power of only 37%. And gray, oh, height 6, yes, that's correct. And then the gray tank, diagnostic, power of 37%. So that's fine. I've noticed that goes down as you fill the tank up with stuff. They just say it's a reflection of received signal strength. So the gray tanks are probably dirtier and they're probably a little bit thicker than that fresh tank. So I'm okay with that. We're getting what seem to be accurate readings. So the next step is to clean up all this water stuff and then mount the senders permanently in the locations where I've got them. So I've drained all the water now, it's all gone. And there's a very specific reason why I had to do that. And that's because you're not supposed to install these sensors, like the adhesive doesn't work so well if the tank is just icy cold. And the water, let's be honest, it was a little cold. So the water's gone and I'll be heating up the tanks with a hairdryer before I go to apply the sticker. Now, we're gonna start with this one, which is the, what is that? That's the galley tank. So this is where it is, and it's held down with just this painter's tape now. And I'd really like to nail it right back in that same spot. So what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna remove half of the painter's tape, and then I'm gonna mark around the sensor where it was so that I've got a visual to try to hit when I come back when it's all sticky and money's going. So, there. That'll be enough to get me lined back up. Okay, now other parts of tank prep, some of which I did last night, was it's a good idea to like sand the tank down with 220 grit, which I did last night, just to make sure you've got a nice smooth surface. The other thing, which I'm going to repeat today, is, and I do this for just about any time I use an adhesive, is I wipe the surface down with denatured alcohol, just to make sure there's no residue or gunk on it that might prevent things from sticking. So now we're just going to heat up the tank with this old hair dryer that I keep in the shop, and then when it's nice and warm, we'll apply the sticker. All right, here we go. All right.
Hear your voice.
Yep. Now, are we
I see your fingers.
twisting around this?
No, we're clear. We're coming straight. If you
Now, the sensor on this tank, which will be labeled the gray tank, is actually on the back side here. I had to loosen this wall and push it out. I've got a little block in there to give me some space. So there's no marking and measuring or anything to get this sensor on. I'm going to have to do it entirely by feel once I get it warmed up. So let's remove the temporary and then we'll do it for reals. I had to extend these wires, so for that I just used butt connectors, and I'm just sealing up the heat shrink on those butt connectors. All right, that is stuck on as well as I think it can be. Let me just fish these wires back up inside and hook them back up.
how about?
Okay, got it. Just keep me untangled.
Yeah, go ahead.
Reassembling things is fun. Lots of fun. Oh, such fun. Reassembling things is fun. Watch this. Coolest tool of the day. I got to put on this nut behind there. Right? Right? What did we do next? Was it this?
Because otherwise you can't pull this out far enough. You know when you.
Ha! Okay, so I got the things on the gray tanks and I've got this cabinet reassembled, but boy, that was not easy between the rivets and then this thing, which didn't want to push back on, and wedging all these things in here. Not an easy reinstall, but it's done. And we're going to close this door and never speak of it again. Okay, and last but not least, the fresh tank. This one's kind of a challenge. I have to actually apply the sticker from inside there. All right, watch me struggle. Well, that's an odd noise to hear right now. All right, final sensor is installed. So I'm going to take a few minutes and tidy up the wires, and then we'll install the control panel for the final time, and we'll be done. Okay, so here's the trim panel that I made. You saw on the 3D printer earlier. But before I put this in, like for reals, we're going to do one last check of all the sensors. Make sure that they survived their installation. All right, so and that'll go in there. It'll look something like that. I got to finish putting the screws in. All right, battery, 12.5, reasonable. Fresh, 6%. I guess I didn't quite drain all the water out of it. Gray, empty. Galley, empty. And there is nothing connected to the black. All right, so fresh, let's see, P92. So not P00, but P92. So fine. So that's like the signal strength or power, they call it. Gray, 37. Ooh. And galley. I'm going to have to keep remembering that galley is the closest. P37. Okay. So, and I did cut myself finally, so it's a project, but completely comical how I cut myself. I was holding something and drilling through it, and I actually drilled into my pinky tip. So, yeah, I had to laugh. It was so ridiculous. Anyway, so mount this up, but that's the way we're going to leave it, and that's the SeeLevel install. Hey, so we installed this like, I don't know, about a month ago, I guess, and it has continued to work absolutely flawlessly since. We're here outside of Phoenix, and right now, battery, 12.5, fresh tank, 75% full, gray tank, 17%, galley tank, 17%. I leveled this up when we got here. And the black tank, I still haven't figured out how to hook up the cassette toilet to that. So, SeeLevel working flawlessly as it has in every coach I've ever had it, so thumbs up there on the SeeLevel. Now, if you're watching on YouTube, there'll be a link in the description. You can follow that over to our website where you can ask questions. If you saw me using a tool and you want to know, wow, what is that? I'll try to get you a link for it. So I guess that's going to do it for now. This is James, Good RV. See you later. Bye.